The United States is drowning in debt, more than $36 trillion, and climbing by nearly $1 trillion every 100 days. That's the equivalent of $15,000 owed per taxpayer. While Washington keeps spending and Wall Street gambles with high-risk strategies, ordinary Americans are living paycheck to paycheck, just one emergency away from disaster. Across the nation, states are already cracking under the pressure. Pensions going broke, hospitals shutting down, schools falling apart, and populations shrinking. When the next financial storm arrives, some states won't just struggle, they may completely unravel. Today, we're breaking down the 10 U.S. states most likely to collapse first if the economy crashes. Stick with us until the end to see which states are most vulnerable in 2025. If you want more hard-hitting insights like this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and tell us in the comments where you're tuning in from. Number 10. West Virginia. West Virginia is already living through what a slow-motion collapse looks like. Once fueled by coal, the state has seen more than 75% of coal jobs vanish since 2010. Thousands of good-paying positions disappeared, leaving entire towns without a lifeline. With no major industries to replace them, many residents now rely on low-wage service jobs or government assistance. The poverty rate sits at 20.5%, far above the national average of 12%. Median household income is just $55,000 compared to the U.S. average of $70,000. Only about 55% of working-age adults are even in the labor force, meaning nearly half the population has stopped trying altogether. On top of that, West Virginia is at the center of the opioid epidemic. The state leads the nation in overdose deaths, as high as 84 per 100,000 people in certain counties, wiping out workers and costing billions. Since 2010, the state has lost more than 100,000 residents as young people flee to Ohio, Texas, and beyond. With 21% of the population over the age of 65, pensions and healthcare costs are pushing the state budget to the edge. Roads and bridges are crumbling, and more than a third of the budget depends on federal funding. If that money ever dries up, West Virginia could collapse almost overnight. Number 9. Mississippi. Mississippi sits at or near the bottom of nearly every major economic measure in the United States. The state's median household income is just $48,000, a full $22,000 below the national average. That leaves many families stretched thin and living one bill away from financial ruin. Poverty is widespread. 1 in 5 residents lives below the poverty line, and in some rural counties that figure jumps above 35%, trapping entire communities in cycles of hardship. Mississippi also has the lowest workforce participation rate in the country. Only 56% of working-age adults have a job or are actively looking for one. That means almost half the population has essentially given up on the job market. Education is another weak spot. Mississippi consistently ranks at the bottom in test scores and high school graduation rates, while underfunded schools and limited college opportunities push young people to leave the state permanently. Those who remain often face limited career paths and low wages. Healthcare is just as grim. Mississippi has the highest infant mortality rate in America and an average life expectancy that's 5 years shorter than the U.S. average. Rural hospitals are shutting down at an alarming pace, leaving many families hours away from basic care. About 15% of residents lack health insurance, meaning a single medical emergency can lead to financial disaster. Infrastructure only deepens the crisis. Nearly 1 in 4 bridges is considered unsafe, and water system failures, like Jackson's headline-making water crisis, highlight just how fragile things are. On top of that, Mississippi depends on federal funds for 40% of its entire state budget, with no real savings or rainy day funds to fall back on. If the U.S. slips into another major recession, Mississippi could be among the first states to face a complete breakdown of critical services. from education to healthcare to basic infrastructure. Number 8. Michigan. Michigan is often described as a comeback story after the 2008 financial crash, but beneath the surface, the state is still on shaky ground. Detroit's downtown has been revitalized and tech hubs like Ann Arbor are growing, but Michigan's economy leans heavily on automotive manufacturing, and that's a dangerous bet in uncertain times. In 2024, nearly 20% of Michigan's GDP came directly from car production. That means any disruption to the global supply chain or a drop in car sales could send shockwaves through the state's economy. Already, about 40% of Michigan residents report struggling with overdue bills, medical debt, or bad credit, showing just how fragile household finances remain. The median household income is around $63,000, well below the U.S. average, and poverty rates remain stubbornly high, especially in Detroit, where some neighborhoods have poverty levels above 30%. Population decline adds to the problem. Between 2020 and 2024, more than 100,000 people left Michigan, draining small towns of tax revenue and leaving behind blocks of empty homes. In Detroit alone, about 22% of housing units sit vacant, dragging down property values across the city. Infrastructure is falling apart. Almost half of Michigan's roads are rated in poor condition, requiring an estimated $7 billion in annual repairs just to keep up. Water contamination is another ticking time bomb. Flint's lead crisis may have made national headlines, but other counties still face dangerous drinking water issues. The opioid epidemic continues to devastate communities, with overdose deaths doubling in the last decade. Rural hospitals are closing, leaving residents without critical care. If the auto industry takes another hit or consumer spending drops, Michigan could once again see waves of foreclosures, mass layoffs, and abandoned neighborhoods, proving its recovery may be far more fragile than it looks. Number 7. Alabama. Alabama has plenty of charm, from its rich culture and football passion to its stunning landscapes. But behind the surface, the state's economy is fragile and falling behind. The median household income is only $59,000, making it one of the lowest in the country. At the same time, about 16% of residents, nearly 800,000 people, live in poverty, struggling to cover basic needs like food, rent, and healthcare. Education is another major weakness. Alabama ranks in the bottom 5 nationwide, with underfunded schools, a shortage of teachers, and low graduation rates. Only 27% of adults hold a college degree compared to the national average of 37%. That gap pushes young talent to leave the state for better opportunities in places like Texas or Georgia, draining Alabama of its future workforce. Healthcare struggles are severe. Alabama never expanded Medicaid, leaving around 300,000 people without affordable health coverage. Since 2010, more than 15 rural hospitals have shut down, forcing residents in many areas to drive hours for basic medical care. The state's infant mortality rate is among the highest in the nation, and life expectancy is about 3 years shorter than the U.S. average. Infrastructure is falling apart, too. Roughly 16% of Alabama's bridges are classified as unsafe, and many rural areas lack access to high-speed internet, cutting communities off from modern job opportunities. Economically, the state depends on a few key industries: aerospace, car manufacturing, and agriculture. But without diversification, a downturn could crush them all at once. With little in savings, Alabama's budget would collapse under the weight of a serious recession. That could mean school closures, hospital shutdowns, and critical services disappearing, leaving thousands of families stranded. Number 6. Arkansas. Arkansas may not make national headlines often, but beneath the surface, its economic foundation is alarmingly weak. With a median household income of just $53,000, one of the lowest in the country, many families live paycheck to paycheck. Roughly 15% of residents live below the poverty line, and in rural counties, struggling households are the norm rather than the exception. Jobs are scarce outside the cities. Many small towns rely on shrinking industries, while healthcare access has become a crisis. Over 200,000 Arkansans have no health insurance, and since 2010, at least 10 rural hospitals have closed, forcing residents to drive 50 miles or more just to see a doctor. Medical debt is one of the leading causes of bankruptcy in the state. Education isn't faring much better. Only 26% of adults hold a college degree compared to the national 37%. Rural schools often lack teachers, resources, and modern programs, leaving students unprepared for today's job market. This pushes young talent out of the state, further weakening Arkansas's future prospects. The state's economy leans heavily on Walmart, its largest private employer, but even that's risky. Automation and corporate restructuring have already cut jobs, while farming and small-scale manufacturing struggle with low profits and competition from abroad. Meanwhile, 40% of rural areas lack reliable high-speed internet, and roads across the state are deteriorating, slowing down both commerce and daily life. Most troubling, Arkansas depends on federal aid for nearly 45% of its state budget. That means in the event of a national recession, funding cuts could devastate already fragile services, leaving schools underfunded, hospitals closed, and families with no safety net. Number 5. Kentucky. Kentucky tells the story of what happens when major industries collapse and nothing rises to take their place. Coal once fueled the state's economy, but since 2010, coal jobs have fallen by more than 60%, leaving eastern Kentucky with some of the highest unemployment rates in the country. With so many families left behind, poverty has become entrenched. About 18% of Kentuckians live below the poverty line, and in certain Appalachian counties, it climbs above 25%. The median household income sits at just $57,000, far below the national average, and only 58% of working-age adults are employed or even looking for work. That means more than 4 out of 10 adults are simply disconnected from the job market. Many households rely on food stamps or disability checks just to get by. Healthcare access is another crisis. Since 2010, 12 rural hospitals have closed, leaving thousands of residents an hour or more away from emergency care. Life expectancy in Kentucky is about 4 years shorter than the U.S. average, and the state loses over 2,100 people annually to opioid overdoses, one of the highest rates in the nation. Education also lags. Only 27% of adults hold a college degree, and rural schools struggle with chronic underfunding, low graduation rates, and a shortage of teachers. As a result, young people often move away to pursue careers elsewhere, hollowing out entire communities. Kentucky still relies heavily on coal and tobacco, industries with shrinking futures. Add in poor infrastructure and limited broadband internet in rural regions, and the state faces serious barriers to attracting new industries. If the U.S. slips into a deep recession, entire sections of Kentucky could be left abandoned and without functioning services. Number 4. Nevada. Nevada may glitter with the bright lights of Las Vegas, but its economy is built on a dangerous gamble. Nearly 1/3 of the state's workforce depends on tourism, hotels, and casinos, industries that are the first to collapse in a downturn. When times are tough, tourists stop coming. Casinos cut jobs, and entire communities are left without income. We've seen it before. During the Great Recession, Nevada's unemployment rate hit 13%, the highest in the country at the time. Even today, the state's jobless rate swings wildly, climbing quickly whenever visitor numbers dip. Housing is another fragile piece of the puzzle. Nevada suffered one of the worst foreclosure crises in 2008, and history may repeat itself. Since 2020, home prices have surged nearly 40%, with Las Vegas homes now averaging $450,000. Yet incomes hover around $72,000, leaving families stretched thin. Another economic crash could push thousands of homeowners underwater once again. Outside the neon glow of Las Vegas and Reno, rural Nevada struggles with shrinking populations, limited job opportunities, and weak health care access. Infrastructure isn't much better. About 21% of Nevada's bridges are rated unsafe, and the state faces severe water shortages from the Colorado River, threatening both households and businesses. The state budget is equally risky. Nevada relies heavily on tourism and sales taxes, which collapsed by 30% during the pandemic. With no state income tax, Nevada has little financial cushion. In short, the state's economy works like a casino game, flashy during the boom years, but a devastating loss when the cards turn cold. Number 3. Louisiana. Louisiana is a state that always seems to be fighting an uphill battle, and the numbers reveal just how fragile things are. Nearly 19% of residents, close to 900,000 people, live in poverty, one of the highest rates in the nation. The median household income sits at just $56,000, keeping families on the edge while costs rise. The economy leans heavily on oil and gas, industries that boom and bust with global prices. When prices drop, entire regions see layoffs and shuttered businesses. Empty factories and fading small towns are the clearest sign that Louisiana has struggled to diversify its economy. Then there's the state's vulnerability to disasters. Hurricanes like Ida in 2021, which caused $75 billion in damages, not only destroy homes and businesses but also cripple Louisiana's already weak infrastructure. Every storm season brings the risk of new devastation, and the state doesn't have the reserves to bounce back quickly. Infrastructure is crumbling at every level. Over 1,500 bridges are unsafe, and roads, levees, and water systems require billions in repairs. Flooding remains a constant threat in Baton Rouge and New Orleans, while Louisiana's coastline is literally disappearing, with wetlands vanishing at one of the fastest rates in the world. The brain drain makes things worse. More than 70% of LSU graduates leave the state within 5 years, taking skills and talent to stronger economies. Rural populations are shrinking, healthcare systems are stretched thin, and thousands remain uninsured. With poverty, weak infrastructure, reliance on oil, and repeated natural disasters, Louisiana risks not just economic decline, but outright collapse if another recession collides with a major storm. Number 2. Hawaii. Hawaii looks like paradise on the surface. Blue oceans, golden sunsets, and luxury resorts. But for everyday residents, life on the islands is anything but easy. The median home price has soared past $850,000, while the average household earns just $88,000 per year. That makes home ownership nearly impossible for most locals, forcing many to rent at sky-high prices or leave the islands altogether. The cost of living is crushing. Groceries, gas, and household goods often cost double the mainland average because almost everything has to be shipped in. A gallon of milk can hit $6, gas is over $5, and even basics like bread and eggs eat up huge chunks of a family budget. Tourism powers about 30% of Hawaii's economy, making it extremely vulnerable to downturns. When visitors collapsed by 70% during 2020, thousands of jobs vanished overnight, and even by 2024, tourism remained below pre-pandemic levels. The ripple effects hit hard. Hotels, restaurants, and local businesses suffered, leaving families with little to fall back on. At the same time, many native Hawaiians are being priced out of their own homeland. Wealthy outsiders buying vacation homes and short-term rentals have pushed costs even higher, forcing tens of thousands of locals to leave between 2010 and 2024. Healthcare is stretched thin. Rural areas lack doctors, and residents often wait months for basic care. The islands import about 81% of their food, meaning supply chain disruptions can leave shelves empty. Energy costs are also among the highest in the nation, driving up bills even further. For the rich, Hawaii may be a dream, but for the average family, it's an unsustainable struggle. If a serious recession cuts tourism again, Hawaii could find itself in an economic freefall. Number 1. Illinois. Illinois is home to Chicago's iconic skyline, world-class universities, and a proud industrial past. But behind that image lies one of the most dangerous financial crises in America, a massive pension debt that could pull the entire state down. Illinois owes about $139 billion in retirement obligations, the worst shortfall in the nation. That's equal to nearly $11,000 for every single resident, from newborns to seniors. This crushing debt has pushed Illinois' credit rating to just above junk status, making it extremely expensive for the state to borrow money. Every economic downturn forces Illinois to take on even more debt, paying higher interest rates while cutting funding for schools, healthcare, and basic services. Taxes are already among the highest in the country. Property owners pay an average of 2.2% of their home's value every year, meaning a $300,000 home racks up more than $6,600 in annual property taxes. Families are leaving in droves. In 2024 alone, more than 83,000 people moved out of Illinois, many of them high-income earners who carried a large share of the tax base. While Chicago's financial and tech sectors continue to grow, smaller towns and manufacturing communities are withering. The median household income is about $75,000, close to the national average, but rising costs and relentless taxes weigh heavily on residents. Nearly 2,400 bridges need repairs, yet infrastructure spending is constantly delayed because pension obligations swallow up so much of the budget. For Illinois, the math simply doesn't work. With fewer taxpayers, skyrocketing debts, and services already strained, another recession could mean brutal cuts, higher taxes, and an even bigger exodus of families and businesses. If any state is primed to collapse under financial pressure, it's Illinois. And there you have it. The 10 U.S. states most likely to collapse first if the economy crashes. Some are already hanging by a thread, and the next downturn could push them over the edge. If you found this eye-opening, hit like, smash that subscribe button, and let us know in the comments. Which state do you think is at the greatest risk? Stay tuned, more big breakdowns are coming right here on Nation Peak.